It's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. To make the occasion, people from across the country came together to honor the civil rights leader and his legacy. We talked to a civil rights activist about Martin Luther King Jr.'s achievements and what we can learn from him.
Over half a century ago, an American Baptist minister from Georgia became one of the most important figures in U.S. history. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led the civil rights movement to successfully call for the end of racial segregation. The civil rights leader marched in the street and spoke at podiums across the country. His most famous speech, "I Have a Dream," helped pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Civil rights activist and president of the Woodson Center, Bob Woodson, said King's greatest achievement was keeping the movement pointing towards fulfilling the American dream.
He was critical of our past, but he was hopeful that America could live up to its promise. And so he always was a patriot, he supported the nation, and he was directing us to live by the content of our character. He was not asking for special privileges. He was not demanding reparations. He was talking about opening the doors of opportunity.
One of the hallmarks of Dr. King's teachings was to bring about change through peaceful protest rather than violence. Woodson said he thinks there's been a departure from what the late civil rights leader stood for.
I think the civil rights leadership has abandoned the moral high ground that it was established by King. It was Dr. King who spoke out against violence. He spoke out against the violence of the Ku Klux Klan, but he also spoke out vigorously against retaliatory violence.
Last year, the country was subject to months of violence and chaos, often supported by Black Lives Matter activists and Antifa. The riots resulted in over $1 billion in damages. That's on top of dealing with health and economic crises. But Woodson says King's optimism is what brought the country to a better place.
And I think that Dr. King was, again, a very hopeful man, but he taught us redemptive suffering, that sometimes we have to go through suffering before we know what healing is all about. But he was a healing agent, and I think that Dr. King always was leading us to the light.
Woodson added that people around the world risked their lives to get to the U.S. not because it's a failure, but because of America's rich legacy as the shining city on a hill. Don Tran, NTD News.